if you've been struggling with how to paint ice to the point that you just avoid it altogether, like drying hands, then watch this video. Join me on this tutorial for beginner to intermediate acrylic painters, where we're going to paint some ice. So grab your sketchbook, grab your paints. You got this. Let's go. For inspiration for ice, I only have to look out my window to see some ice, although this is not the prettiest picture for ice, so we're going to use something else. But these are the materials you may want to have. Pretty standard acrylic paint materials. They don't have to be exactly what I'm showing here, but just make sure you have some variety in brushes, in sizes. That will be useful. Some painter's tape and sketchbook, something to paint on. Water jars, 2 of them with a little bit of water in there. You don't have to have much. A cloth, always need a cloth on hand, or a paper towel. I prefer a cloth, it just goes longer. And something to put the paint on. What colors will we be using? I can speak words. Magenta, or you can do kind of orange colors if you're not into pink. Cobalt blue, dioxazine purple, Mars black, and titanium white. Use anything similar to these things. You don't have to use exact. The reason I'm taping, I'm going to show you right here. This painting, no tape. This painting, tape. The difference, this one looks a little more professional, finished, that kind of thing. So I like the taped look, but you don't have to. You can just paint right to the edge, or do it some other way. But I just find it's easiest to put some tape on the edge, try to make it equal on all sides, and painter's tape is best so that you can pull it off without destroying the paper. This sketchbook, by the way, does have pretty decent paper on it. Anyways, I found this picture on Pexels, and it's like these icicles. And instead of just doing like ice cubes, I decided let's do some icicles. But you can paint whatever you want. So I'm going to put all my colors on. I'm not putting black on at this point, but I'm going to put my blue, purple, pink, and white. Wake up the brushes by wetting it in the water, dabbing it off. Let's get some dioxazine and blue mixed onto the page. And might need to wet my brush here and there. Then I'm going to add some of that pink mixed with white onto there, so I have this interesting looking background. And the fun thing about this painting is you can make your background however you like. It can be more of the blurred background. You can make it more textured looking. Really play with it, have some fun. So I'm kind of just using my flat brush to blend, and then once I kind of have the color on there, using that mop brush to kind of just blend it out, soften those strokes. It kind of makes them a little more invisible, gives that kind of blurred effect. Make sure you wash your brushes when you're not using them. You don't want them to sit with acrylic paint. And this is why I have 2 jars as well. You can see that the second jar I put it in is not dirty. That's because I went in the first jar, call it my dirty jar, and I always go into that one first. So I always have a jar that's a bit cleaner when I need some clean water while I'm working. Okay, I'm going to grab some black and my 1/4 inch angle brush. Love this brush, one of my favorites. And then we're going to draw some branches. So I'm kind of starting with my tonal values in the darkest way first, and then go into my highlights. So sometimes I start with the darker, and sometimes it makes sense to start with lighter. Might depend just on the painting, but if you think about it, if I were to paint this after putting on icicle details and things, that's going to take me longer to do that. So whatever makes the most sense, this to me makes the most sense. It's also giving me a placement. I didn't sketch this on first. I just used my brush to sketch it on, and I'm just using my angle brush, but you could use a script liner brush to do the smaller little, here's the script liner brush right here. You could use that to do branches. It is such a fantastic brush. If you don't have one of these and you like to do like detailed work, you should get one of these, especially if you like to do like, trees and branches and things like that. Like, it is such a great brush, and you can always fix little mistakes if you notice it right away with a clean brush that's a little bit damp. You can, I don't know if you saw me fix that up, but I was able to. Okay, so I'm starting now that I had all my branches in place, going in like with pure white over top and adding all my brightest whites in place. Okay, so that's the step I'm working on now, and I'm just going to keep going at that until I have everything marked down. This is kind of like mapping things out. So I'm mapping it all out with the darks and the lights, and then we can go into further detail. So this is how I like to paint. I know some artists, they'll focus on one spot, kind of one area, and finish that area, and then like move around. Like if you're working on a bird, like work on the beak until it's totally finished, and then, you know, like sectioned out. But that's not really how I work. I like to work with the color that I'm working with. And I think that lends well to acrylics, because once your acrylic paint dries, you can't blend with it. So, and then you'd have to recreate the color. So it works two ways. So I can understand why someone might want to finish an area while the paint is wet if they need to blend it. So if you need to blend it, that makes sense to do it that way. But if you're just working in layers like I am for this piece, then this makes sense. So I can see value in both ways, and it's not that I only exclusively do this way of painting, especially because you can have multiple colors kind of maintaining their freshness and not drying up. You can kind of keep them wet while you're working for a while. So there's ways to do it, but this is just the way I like to do it. So going with the flow. Now with the script liner brush, what I'm doing now is I'm adding in some color. And with Icicles, I don't know if you've really analyzed Icicles before, but because of the way that they're structured, they're not a color, right? They depend on their surroundings for how they appear. Not necessarily their shape, but just their coloring. So because my background has these pinks and purples, the actual Icicles are also going to have those. So, and then probably a mix of some white for the snow and just the brightest highlights too. So it's a combination of the two. So this really thin top layer, like not layer, but the top edge of, that makes sense. The edge of the icicle at the top is very thin. And if you look at pictures of Icicles, it makes sense that it's thin, almost showing a delicacy about it. It's like a delicacy. I don't think that was the right word. It's very delicate, it's fragile, and that thin line on top kind of lends to that. Now what I'm doing is I'm taking that same color that's just like the pink mixed with some white and thinned out. When you're using this script liner brush, because it doesn't have a lot of bristles, it's not going to hold a lot of water. So you do need to use, I think, fairly thin paint with it. Like if you're trying to use like globby, heavy body paints, it's not going to work as well with it. So almost an ink is what works well with this. So I really thin out my paint when I'm working with that. As you can kind of see there, you need to add some water to it. And sometimes I use a dropper because adding water with this brush can take a while. So having a little dropper helps. So now I'm adding in some more dark colors within the icicle. And it's really good to work back and forth like that, adding in a bit of dark, adding in a bit of light as you're doing that. And I didn't want to leave the branches just completely black, because if I look closely at it, there are details that I can see with a bit of highlighting. So that's why I added a little bit of that on the branches as well. And I just want to go in and refine everything the best that I can to either your own breaking point of patience or just maybe where your abilities are at the moment. All these different factors kind of tie in, like how observant you are and how well you've kind of mimicked your reference. I find there's certain points where I'm like, well, I didn't do this very well for the drawing aspect of my reference, so it's hard to then depict that if my branches weren't quite the same, that kind of thing. So it's kind of coming together. I don't know fully if I feel like this really does look like Icicles. Part of me doesn't feel so. Fail. But you know what? I'm not mad about it because I've never really tried painting Icicles before. And so I'm going to give myself a little bit of love and grace and And you know what? That's what the sketchbook is for too. It's in the sketchbook. It's practice, it's learning, and there's growth that happens even when it seems like you failed. So if you feel like you failed, like I kind of look at this and think, I don't think I like it. That doesn't mean it did fail. It could just mean maybe the color combinations didn't blend as well. Maybe the details were okay, but I think if I had gone a little warmer instead of like the cool pink, that would have been a bit better. But you know what? We'll sign it anyways. I'm not going to be too ashamed of it. So I'll own it. I'll own it. Whatever it is, why not? Because, hey, this is my work. This is my sketchbook, like I said, and can't be mad about that. Well, what do you guys think? Let me know. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. And hopefully we'll see your work on social media. Tag me at KmoArtYYC to share with me what you've created. So, what did you think? I hope you enjoyed that lesson. And if you enjoy painting with acrylics or want to learn how to do it better or more and have inspiration, then make sure you subscribe to this channel. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching.